Hello and welcome to RADTV, live at 5:25 on CCTV. Chittenden County Channel 17, Centre for Media and Democracy and Town Meeting Television. For those that haven't seen our show before, RAD stands for Rights and Democracy, a grassroots people-powered organisation committed to creating independent political movement for long-lasting fundamental change in Vermont and New Hampshire. With me tonight we have two guests. Welcome to the show, James Haslam, Executive Director of Rights and Democracy. Good evening.
Thanks for having me.
And we also have Betsy McGavisk, and I apologise.
That's McGavisk, you got it, you nailed it.
Excellent. RAD's regional organiser for Chittenden County. So thank you very much, both of you, for turning up.
Thanks for having us, Tom.
No worries. Tonight we are going to be speaking about a couple of campaigns RAD are running at the moment, and that is the Jobs, Climate and Justice campaign, and also the Green New Deal. And so first of all, let's talk a little bit about jobs, justice and climate. Betsy, this is for you. So why does RAD put these three elements together, and how do the three relate to each other?
Yeah. So jobs, justice, climate, I think there's a lot of reasons that they would be linked. First of all, like the root causes of a lot of the problems that we're seeing in our society or economic system are causing injustices in terms of like exploitation of our environment, is causing climate change, is causing worker exploitation, is causing systems of oppression and things like that. So these root causes are really one and the same of an economic system that is rooted in exploitation, I think. And I think we also link them because there's an opportunity there. In terms of like addressing climate change, we need a total mass mobilization, a total restructuring of our economy in order to avoid total climate catastrophe. And so there totally is an opportunity to, like, if we are going to be doing this restructuring, why not try to address some of these other problems that we're seeing in our world. So I think that's kind of why they're linked.
Okay. And the three policy solution that RAD is being proposing is switching 100% to clean fuels, revolutionizing transport and housing infrastructure. And the transport and clean fuels kind of make sense, but James, maybe you could tell me, why does housing infrastructure come into this one of these three elements?
Well, if you look at where our energy is going, what our impact on the planet is going, obviously transportation is a huge piece of it. How we are energizing all of our homes and our economy, but our housing, because especially in a cold weather climate, a lot of energy is going into heating our homes, and partly, getting back to what Betsy was saying, big picture, as we look at the challenges ahead and the decades ahead around the climate crisis, we realize that it's not just climate policies or energy policies. It really is almost all of our policies. It's not a special interest area. It really is an overarching area, because it's about what is our relationship with the planet. That for too long we've had a relationship where we've thought that we can just have this grand human world where we essentially extract the natural environment to make it fit our needs and our pleasures, and act like it's infinite. And then we're realizing now, as many cultures around the world have realized for a long time, that it isn't infinite, and we have to live in harmony with it. So that includes how we heat our homes and how we live. So having housing policies that are able to be sustainable and use as little energy as possible makes a tremendous amount of sense for the long haul.
And that's definitely looking at it from a 30,000-foot view. In terms of specific policies you'd like to see change in Vermont and New Hampshire, where can lawmakers in these two states focus on in order to start making steps towards a greener future?
Well, energy efficiency is a no-brainer thing. We've done a lot of it. There's no reason why. I mean, there's a reason why youth around this world are going on strike for the climate. We're in a crisis, and so the fact that we have energy inefficient homes all over the state doesn't make any sense. So we should be putting in all the resources we can to make sure that all of our housing and commercial buildings in the state are as efficient as possible immediately. We don't have time to waste, and so programs should be expanded across both our states. So that's one immediate thing. Obviously, there should be more standards on new buildings so that we're not making inefficient homes, and we're making sure that we're building a sustainable future as much as possible. So those are a couple of policies.
And two of the elements we were talking about was justice as well as jobs and climate. In what way is climate change going to impact those that are most vulnerable? Because it does seem that climate change seems quite an abstract point of view when we're up in Vermont. But in what way are those most vulnerable being affected right now and likely to be affected in the future with regards to climate change?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're already seeing climate disasters happening, like climate change is here. We're witnessing the impacts, and who is able to recover from those climate disasters, and who doesn't have the resources to be able to recover from those disasters, and who is dying because of those climate disasters. And so, even most recently, over the last few years, Hurricane Maria killed thousands of people in Puerto Rico, and the U.S. provided not nearly enough funding, did not cover it enough on mainstream media and things like that. And even this week, a HUD official kind of let slip or during a congressional hearing that they intentionally withheld billions of dollars from hurricane relief in Puerto Rico because the people at HUD felt that the housing organizations of Puerto Rico wouldn't be able to handle the funds or wouldn't appropriately use the funds. And so now we're seeing in Puerto Rico, homes aren't being rebuilt as fast as they can. And so that's one example of a place with resources. We're doing okay. And there are certain populations in the United States that are not doing okay, but we're withholding resources from populations that are otherwise dying. And then I think in other parts of people's lives, climate change is going to impact predominantly poor folks, Black and brown folks, in every part of their lives. So housing, like we mentioned, of whose homes are inefficient, whose homes are being knocked down by climate disasters. Healthcare, even in Vermont, we're seeing an increase of ticks and tick-borne illnesses. And so who has access to healthcare? A lot of times it's not poor folks. To deal with those increased health challenges, we're going to be seeing increased drought. So we're going to have more access or issues with food access, and then things like immigration. A lot of the people at the U.S. borders are climate refugees, and our response has been to imprison them. So there's obviously so many different ways that climate change is going to be impacting our daily lives, but it's going to be proportionally impacting poor folks.
And RAD actually works with a couple of climate-focused political groups to aid with your current campaigns, the People's Climate Movement and 350 Vermont. Tell me in which ways you partner with them and what your main shared goals are together.
Yeah, no, it's exciting. I mean, so when you mentioned the Jobs, Justice, and Climate campaign of Rights and Democracy, it's a campaign that that we started when we started Rights and Democracy back in 2015, and we worked very closely with 350. And as a new organization, we saw some fabulous work getting done across the state in single issues and in certain issue areas. What we were trying to do as a multi-issue organization is see the interconnections. So that's why how our human rights are interconnected and what the role of having a real democracy has in being able to uphold all of them. So 350 has been an organization that we've worked with from the beginning in both states, Vermont and New Hampshire. As the climate crisis is accelerated and increasing awareness is being, thanks to the youth, thanks to people like Greta Thunberg, thanks to, people have been doing this stuff for years, all over this country and this world, the Climate Justice Alliance and most impacted communities, people are waking up. So when you asked about, kind of this notion of jobs, justice, climate, and a Green New Deal, jobs, justice, crime was kind of our original framing, and it's been exciting to see over the last year how so many groups are now talking about a Green New Deal. And so there's climate groups that are springing up, like Extinction Rebellion, like the Sunrise Movement, In New Hampshire, there's a group we work with called the New Hampshire Youth Movement, which is very much working on this issue. And and there's traditional groups that have been around in doing work around climate and environmental. Some fabulous groups here in the state. So what we're really thinking about is that we want to work with everyone that's working on this issue, but also we think it's an issue that we all have to be stakeholders on. It's not something that we can just have just the climate groups like figure out how to figure out our economy, and it's been exciting. But the Green New Deal wasn't just a platform of energy and climate policy. In the resolution that Alexander Ocasio-Cortez and the Sunrise Movement have been pushing for, Senator Ed Markey as well, it includes Medicare for all. It includes a federal jobs guarantee. It includes big picture stuff, and so that's great, and we need to have that happen on a federal level. But the question for our communities is, what would a just transition to an economy that actually put people in the first look like, where everyone can thrive? And so we'd like to work with the climate groups, environmental groups, basically every group, certainly unions, any community stakeholders really should be part of this.
All right. I was informed we have a call, so it's actually the first call I'll be taking, so I'm not 100% on how to do this, so we're going to give it a go. Hello, this is Rights and Democracy in Channel 17. Have you got a question?
Yes, I do. I was just wondering, I've been wondering this for a while, but if you ever go into, I know you people probably don't frequent McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King and stuff, but I never see recycle bins there. And I can remember a time when people like McDonald's use styrofoam, but they converted to cardboard, but they still don't have recycle bins in their places. And I just look at it isn't part of the solution, it's part of the problem. That's the only thing I can say about it. And I was just wondering what you people thought about that.
Well, thanks very much for your questions this evening. Is there a responsibility on RAD, or is there a responsibility on the state government to ensure that we have things like recycle bins at our fast food outlets?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Partly it's a very good question. It's a great example of just like really, if you took a step back, just how out of sync we are living. We're letting, this economy, we don't make these decisions. It's not like anyone in town said, let's not have recycle bins at all these establishments. It's a lot of the economy has been driven for not only just making money, but making money for a handful of people on a quarterly basis, for the next quarterly basis for the stocks market to go up. And so they've known that they should be recycling for decades. But it just doesn't make money for the next quarter, so they haven't invested in that. And we haven't regulated it because they have so much power over how public policy gets. So they haven't let us make them recycle. So this is just what we can no longer afford. We can no longer afford these profiteers being able to make, just money, take our money, but destroy our planet, and not let us, do anything. So there's policies being developed around what would a zero waste economy look like. If we figured out, I was at the Hunger Mountain Food Co-op getting some lunch the other day, and I saw someone, and she had a container. This is in Montpelier. She had a container that she was going to get her lunch with that was provided by Hunger Mountain Co-op, and that she turned in her old one, and they gave her a new one. And she filled up all her food, and she got a new container, and she left and brought it back. And that's just it's smart. So in that so there's no we can do all kinds of things if we really wanted to. So we just have to start prioritizing, not destroying things, and living sustainably.
I think that makes actually a very good point as well. That there's many things that we can do personally, but as you mentioned. On a global basis, on a corporate responsibility basis, this doesn't matter how much an individual can do. The polluters are really the giant corporations. I read the other day that Coca-Cola is gone 2 years running as the biggest plastic polluter on the planet. So how much pressure can we put as organizations on our lawmakers to make them listen to us? As they obviously are listening at the moment to, as you said, the kind of moneyed interests that are pushing against these kind of policies.
I think it's the responsibility of, all of us not necessarily be taking these personal austerity measures of cutting out this thing from your life. That's good, but that only, like you said, it only goes so far when we have major polluters. And so it does take all of us to be able to push on these legislators and really hold them accountable to what's going on, and then when we see them not acting or being passive or taking money from oil companies or from groups like Coca-Cola or groups that are exploiting their workers as well, so places like Walmart and things like that. Like when we see that our politicians are taking money from those groups, knowing that like in their minds, that's where their interests are too. And so holding politicians accountable for that kind of thing and then getting them out of office.
Absolutely.
Oh, hi.
Well, thank you very much for your question. You sparked a good conversation.
Thank you very much.
Do you have any follow-up questions?
Oh, no, I thought that was covered pretty well. I'm glad these people are doing that, and I wish there were more like them.
Amen to that. Well, thank you very much for calling in this
You bet. Thanks for taking the call.
No worries. Talking about pushback, I did notice there has been some areas of the public, groups like the No Carbon Tax Vermont, who do push back on the message that RAD is trying to deliver. Have you tried to engage these groups at all? And do you see these entities as an organized kind of resistance, or does it tend to be few and far between that you see these anti-environmental groups?
Well, I mean, partly we think that in some ways that the resistance to the carbon tax is actually a symptom of a bigger problem. And it's not just that people don't care about the environment. It's that for too long, we've approached the issues of trying to deal with the root causes of the climate change as, with small, kind of taking on slivers of the problem. So, the notion that we should be using less fossil fuel and putting a price on carbon, makes a lot of sense. But if you're trying to shift away from the way that we're destroying the planet, the way that we're, if we want to keep fossil fuels in the ground, we have an opportunity to have a much bigger conversation with our communities and say, look, we have to stop destroying the planet. You care about your kids and their kids, grandkids to come. And, we have to do this work. But let's figure out how do we have just policies across the board so that we're not just, on one hand, taxing carbon. And a lot of the policies, have had ways to make it more equitable on that. But, this is what has been exciting about the notion of a Green New Deal and having a bigger policies. This is about transforming the economy in ways that help everyone. If we had a federal jobs guarantee, I mean, that's one of the key pieces of the Green New Deal. That is an absolute game changer in so many ways. I mean, if everyone, there's so much work to do to build infrastructure for our communities, clean water. I mean, here in Burlington, we have so many good jobs to make energy efficient homes, to put solar panels on every roof, to restore devastated habitat. If we gave everyone that wanted a job, a good paying job, to do that work, imagine the economy. And also from a workers' rights standpoint, a lot of the companies that exploit workers. If people didn't only have their option of being unemployed or getting exploited by a terrible low-wage employer that is endangering their lives oftentimes, and could go work, do meaningful work, helping make solutions in the community, that's a game changer. So that's one of the reasons why we're excited. I mean, we think that ultimately we will need to put a cap on carbon. We just gotta freeze fossil fuels in the ground, but it should be couched in meeting a whole bunch of needs in our communities and a vision that we can all be stakeholders in.
I'm glad you mentioned the Green New Deal because I noticed that RAD recently sponsored or hosted Bill McKibben at Castleton University to discuss the Green Mountain New Deal. So how does the Green Mountain New Deal differ from the Green New Deal?
Yeah, so I would say that the Green Mountain New Deal in particular, I mean, it's specific to Vermont. So the Green New Deal is a national, it's like not necessarily a policy, but a framework that has been introduced by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Ed Markey. And again, there's a federal jobs guarantee. There's a lot of information about education and prioritizing education and making sure that we are moving away from a fossil fuel-based economy. And so that's on the national level, and that conversation needs to be happening on the national level. But the Green Mountain New Deal is what can we be doing in Vermont to be doing these same things and push this agenda in the ways that we have the power to. And if we can push it, ideally we can push it faster in Vermont than maybe the nation. And so if we can set an example that we can do this here in Vermont, then maybe it can set an example for the rest of the country that okay, we can also get our act together.
And a follow-up question to that. So the Green New Deal has such a force behind it, or at least from a marketing perspective, is because it's got that great New Deal slogan in it, which we all recognise from our civics classes in the and history classes. So how closely does the Green New Deal relate to the federal New Deal of the 1930s?
Yeah. So I think the language around a New Deal is interesting because in the 1930s, we were facing a Great Depression, and it was kind of one of these gigantic crises of that time. And the New Deal was, again, a framework, but then a set of many policies that came in order to prioritize workers and building back the economy and things like that. And it was not, by no means it was perfect, and it was really unjust in a lot of ways. But it kind of exemplifies this mass mobilization that needs to happen in order to respond to a huge crisis. And so I think that messaging resonates in the same way that we are facing a climate crisis that we need to address in a huge way in every sector of our lives. And so I think that there's a lot of similarities between that and the Great Depression.
James, you invoked the name Extinction Rebellion earlier on, and they're a group that's doing a lot of work right now in the UK. They brought London to a standstill for multiple weeks. Is that the sort of action you want to be seeing over in America or in Vermont to bring awareness to climate change and the devastating effects it's going to have?
I mean, we certainly support it. I mean, the kind of direct action that is happening, often led by youth in this country and increasingly around the world, is necessary, and that's, it would have been great if, we didn't let it get to this stage of a crisis, that people didn't have to take off school, that, that people didn't have to put their bodies on the line, but they do, and people have been doing that for years in Vermont, trying to stop the pipelines from being built and so on, and we should anticipate bigger and more climate strikes and strikes. And that's, if you look at how big change has happened in this country, it's been because of mass direct actions. I mean, actually looking at the New Deal, it wasn't just like enlightened policymakers. I mean, this is one of the core beliefs of rights and democracy, is that, our rights do not fall down from the sky. We're not given them by benevolent rulers. We actually have to demand them and claim them and establish them, and that's exactly what Extinction Rebellion, climate strike folks are doing around the world. And I think it is one huge tool in the toolbox. I mean, for our analysis is that, our theory of change is essentially we have to use all the tools. In the streets, democracy, going on strike, democracy, but also impacting the ballot box and running people from directly impacted communities from office, and seeing how we can build things together. We ultimately, and this is the beautiful thing I think about what is possible with the Green Mountain New Deal, is it's ultimately about having a conversation about what kind of communities do we want to have right now and for the future, and bringing everyone into those conversations. So, we have town meetings, we have much more community fabric in civic life in Vermont than remains in much of the country, as that's been under assault really for generations. And we can use that as a benefit for this transition of what we can have as resilient communities. I think, a good example of what will happen increasingly so if we don't take action is what we saw in Tropical Storm Irene in Vermont, when 30% of the state was in desperate after that, the flooding that went through there. And the response in communities was extraordinary. I mean, it's like the kind of stuff we should be doing all the time. Does everyone have the food that they need? Does everyone have a safe place to sleep? Does people have the access to the health care they need? And so we do that in disastrous times, and we're going to have more extreme weather events, and this is about, how do we have resilient communities together? So yes, take action in the streets, but we have to also just build stronger local democracy.
And what are some RAD initiatives that are going to inform people about this Green New Deal, about the climate change actions that RAD is promoting? How are you getting people on our side?
Yeah, so we're doing a number of different things right now, one being engaging these other groups, engaging key stakeholders to talk about, right, like how do we have this conversation with our community? And to the point that you were just making, James, of bringing everyone together and having this conversation is something that we're looking at doing, of kind of maybe not necessarily town halls, but community-rooted conversations around, okay, where are the strengths in our communities? What resources do we have? Where are areas of concern? When we switch away from a fossil fuel-based economy, who in our community is going to be, left behind, and how do we incorporate them into a just transition? And so right now I think it's definitely a lot of listening and doing community-based conversations.
Yeah. Well, that's all about what we've got time for tonight. James and Betsy, thank you guys so much for coming on. Before we go, I just want to give a shout out to our sustaining memberships so we can keep the lights on at RAD. So help us grow and win, become a sustaining member of Rights and Democracy, and help us continue to push our progressive agenda and values all over Vermont and New Hampshire, including what we've been talking about tonight and a whole host of other policies that we are looking to push through and gain greater support. So be RAD. Become a sustaining member today at radvt.org or radnh.org. We'll see you again next month, right back here on Channel 17 in November, live at 25:25. So this has been RADTV. I've been your host, Tom Proctor. Thank you once again to my guests, and thanks for watching. Good night.